want to talk a little bit about one of the concepts that I use sometimes. It seems to have been kind of helpful to me when it comes to just getting better results or more consistent results with improvisation. One of the issues that I'm personally often confronted with, and that I notice a lot with some other guys, especially guys who have a decent amount of technique, is that I often find myself having to be extra careful in avoiding falling into these ruts where, you know, I'm improvising and I find myself in like autopilot mode, just kind of running through familiar shapes and familiar licks and just up and down the fretboard without really focusing that much on creating and defined ideas, which obviously is the whole point of improvisation. So when I catch myself kind of drifting into that place, I can correct it sometimes to a degree just by thinking a little bit differently. And maybe it's not so much that I'm thinking differently as much as it is that I become more aware of what I'm thinking about or how I'm thinking. So I can start to make it more of an issue of organization. I can just start organizing my thoughts, because if I do that, my ideas start to sound more organized and more defined. So it does help. And there are actually some different thought processes that I can tap into sometimes that are all kind of helpful in their own way. Obviously, there are some of the classic concepts relating to phrasing that I'm sure a lot of you guys are already aware of, such as, implementing the whole question and answer or call and response kind of technique, where as a soloist you present yourself much in the same way that you might interpret a conversation taking place. So a phrase is stated, and then there's another phrase that responds to that that's real similar, reminiscent of the first one, but it's different, but it's through that process that the solo builds, and it's much like a movie would build. And I do talk about that in one of the other videos in one of the other packages, so you can check that out if you want. But the idea in this video really is mainly for the purpose of avoiding that autopilot dilemma. And it's just to remind myself of the whole concept of contrast or polarity or opposites. That's really what this is about, which are all sort of different words for the same thing. Because just by being aware of that as a general concept, I become instantly reminded of how many areas within music that stuff can exist and how much of it I can tap into really at any given time for creative purposes. For instance, when we talk about contrast regarding speed, obviously there's fast playing versus slow playing, contrast between loud and soft, contrast of notes that are tonally inside versus notes that are outside. There's contrast with high notes versus low notes. Rhythmically, you can play inside versus rhythmically outside, or more texturally, and so forth. There's just so many different ways that you can get into the whole concept of contrast, and by implementing it, it can really sort of minimize the potential for what might otherwise have been excessive monotonous qualities that are kind of overly present within the soloing. And it's cool because you can create this game almost, particularly within like a one-chord vamp or a minimal chord vamp scenario, where you deliberately tip the scale one way and make things feel out of balance so that you can eventually counter that with opposition in order to bring it back into balance. Like, deliberately play outside for a while so that, when you finally bring it back in, it feels very appropriate by then. Or hold back from playing real fast for a while so that when you finally do it, it's real dynamic and real powerful. So, and it's helpful, at least for me, it's really helpful in just encouraging the development of more definitive ideas and an overall sense of direction in the improvisation. So to practice this, obviously you're going to want to create an improv setting, either with the backing tracks, or if you have a band that likes to come over and jam out a lot, or if you play out a lot, either one. But the point is, you can't really work on improvising without actually improvising. So probably the easiest route to go for now, at least, is to get a hold of some backing tracks or create some backing tracks, and then just try to go down the list of various polarity-based music concepts and practice trying to apply that. Now, regarding the issue of speed, I think that being aware of different speeds we play at and paying attention to the importance of implementing contrast in that particular category is something that most of us probably already do, simply because speed is such a prominent topic amongst guitarists in general. So we tend to think about not using it as much as we think about using it, which is a good thing. It means that we're kind of overly aware of it, and it's that same type of awareness that can start to help produce cool results when applied in these other areas. Let's take one of the other categories and see if we can start to apply some of these contrast concepts to it. And I'm going to start by focusing on rhythmic playing versus non-rhythmic playing. I'm just going to, basically, I'll try to produce some contrast there. And the non-rhythmic stuff will tend to be very textural, not so much in terms of sound, but more in terms of the way the notes will be placed on top of the music. So you'll probably hear some bigger interval things and maybe some like harmonics, stuff like that. But there won't be much rhythmic clarity to it. And the stuff that I'll play that's inside rhythmically will mostly have like a 16th note or 4-note per beat kind of feel to it. So, and I might include a couple of fast licks in this example, only because a lot of fast playing that I tend to do really isn't based on being rhythmically attached to anything. In other words, When I play really fast, I'm usually not intending for there to be any absolute mathematical consistency regarding the number of notes per beat being played. So in a sense, fast playing for me is more like a textural approach. It's a conglomerate of notes that I see as one thing. So I might sneak some of that in. So let's check it out.
Alright, so you can hear that I'm starting off very free form, just kind of playing some fifths, nothing very rhythmically connected yet. Okay, now at this point I'm starting to grab hold of the rhythm a little bit, and I'm starting to play some 16th notes and just, phrases that are more connected rhythmically. So now I'm back to more non-rhythmic type of stuff. I've got the whammy bar, I'm playing some harmonics, sort of just vibing out. Back to 16th notes. Ended with like a non-rhythmic fast lick.
All right, so another area that I want to talk about trying to apply contrast to is with inside tonality versus outside tonality, playing in and out, that kind of thing. So now in this video, I'm really not going to be getting into specifics regarding the actual outside approaches that I'm using. There's a video that I've done called Outside Playing where I do elaborate on some of the outside approaches that I tend to use. But for now, this stuff has less to do with what I'm playing and more to do with how I'm thinking and how that thought process can affect my playing. So basically what you're going to be listening for is the contrast between those sections of the solo containing notes directly within the framework of the tonality being implied, and the notes that are outside of that implied tonality. So it's basically inside and outside playing. So let's check it out.
Alright, so I'm starting off very much inside, just kind of highlighting the sixth a little bit, exaggerating that Dorian sound. Now I'm obviously taking it outside a little bit, create some tension. Now I'm back in. Click it out again. Right back in. So you heard me take it out midway through that motif, and still just kind of staying out a little bit. And now I'm starting to bring it back in for the ending.
So once again, by having something to focus on and by forcing myself to implement a basic concept, which in this case is the whole polarity and balance thing, it helps me to just minimize some of the meandering qualities that might otherwise start to creep in. So I'm going to play over the same section again, and this time I'm going to try to stay focused on implementing contrast in a number of different areas, and hopefully it'll help to keep me on track. So let's check it out.
Alright, so tonality and rhythm both are pretty inside at this point. Got outside a little bit there. Alright, so we have the fast lick there for contrast, but it's actually rhythmically in. It's like 6 notes per beat. Took it outside a little bit right there. So I went from 16ths to like a non-rhythmic feel right there. And we end with more of the texture type of fast lick, the non-rhythmic kind.
All right, so there you have it, and these are basically just thought techniques that might be able to help you out as far as using methods for the sake of developing your improv skills. If you're going to do this, I would, be sure to implement this stuff in the other areas as well, like the high notes versus low notes, small intervals versus big intervals, and all that stuff. And yeah, hopefully this will prove to be helpful on some level. So there it is. Until next time.